This is Brandon for Woo's Waves, and you're watching my cat. So I posted up and I got a lot of positive response. So I wanted to talk to you today about two things. First of all, we're going to talk about pianos, and second of all, we're going to talk about pads. So what I basically want to do is just kind of break down in the first part how to be a bad piano player. This isn't if you want to be a good piano player. This is pretty much just, this is how you play badly if you're a piano player. And I've done all of these, many of them at the same time in the same service. So, but God's grace, and I'm justified, and hopefully I'm working towards sanctification, because sometimes I still do this, but you know, so piano stuff. So that should get most of us, and then I'm also going to be showing later in the video pads. I might even break this up into a two-part video, but I'm going to be talking about pads. How do we use pads? What are some great ways to create dynamics into our sounds that we're creating? We don't want to just be, I mean, we all want that nice, dark, warm tone, and we all think that we have it, or at least I do. Just kidding, but not really. But so how do we build interest? How do we build dynamics in these sounds so that we aren't, just always defaulting to either turning ourselves up, or, which is a bad idea, or just using the mod wheel, or other stuff like that. So I'm going to be talking about a few different ways that I've discovered to create dynamics with pads. So cool. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you learn some stuff. Hey, so you just had a short break. Probably listened to, I don't know, whatever music I put in there as the intermission. Do I have an intermission? I probably don't even have an intermission. I'm that cheap. But so this is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about how to play piano badly. So because we have such great piano players in the group already. So this is for the people though that really want to get bad. Because I mean, there's enough tutorials about how to do good. So first thing that you're going to want to do is you are going to want to play as much as possible. Play in every single part of the song. Guitar intro, no problem. Just cover it. Cover the guitar with your piano playing. Go nice and chunky like that, because that gives the people what they want. They want the piano nice and loud. So make sure that you're playing a lot during every single part of the song. Try to play as loudly as possible when you're playing every part of the song. And yeah. Well, now in all fairness, I should say, if you want to, some people that are quote-unquote good at playing the piano will say opposite. They'll say, no, Brandon, you really want to play with some space. You want to, if there's a guitar intro, you should let the guitar do the intro. If there's a drum intro, have at it, because you aren't the drums, even though piano is kind of a percussion instrument. Anyways, getting away from it, don't play all the time if you want to be a quote-unquote good piano player. Let's look at the chorus of Christ is Enough. So this is for all of you guys that want to play bad, because I know that there's so many of you out there. So this is what you guys should really be doing. This is what you want to do if you want to play bad. So now, some people would say that that's pretty bad sounding, and instead it should go something more along the lines of what's actually on the album, which is, I think it's like this. I wouldn't know because I'm not a good piano player, but I think it goes something like this. So it's just, it gives so much space to other instruments, and overall you're just going to sound better than when you first started. So don't do that. Don't do that if you want to sound bad. All right. Second point. And this is more on the spiritual side. If your audience, and they're your audience, remember this, doesn't seem to be feeling it, that's when you need to crank up the reverb, my friend. That's when you really need to lay into it. So let's see. See, I'm applying what I... that's going on for a while. Give it a second. I was applying what I was talking about in the first point. See, I was playing a lot. Not as much as some other people, but, you know, just try and play as much as possible. But second point, because we've already covered the first point, you need as many effects on your stuff as possible. Like, otherwise, it doesn't sound cool. And if it doesn't sound cool, then what's the point of playing it, right? By turning on as much of your reverb as possible, you're making your piano sound cool. Versus, because like normal pianos, they're supposed to sound natural, but we don't want to sound natural. We want to sound supernatural. So we're gonna turn our reverb up to super, or wumbo, or whatever you want to call it. Throw on some shift. It's gonna sound good. So yeah, if you wanna be a bad piano player, use all the reverbs, all of the reverbs. Sometimes I even like to stack reverbs. I think that guitar players like to do this. So just a couple instances of Space Designer, and I think it'll be good. Yeah, so that's crazy. So, but you know, sounding cool is not for everybody. So if you want to sound bad, all the reverbs. Now the last part is about playing your part. Actually, it's kind of a two-part part. And if you don't want to sound good, if you want to be a bad piano player, don't learn your part. Don't practice. Because, like, Beethoven, Bach, did those guys practice? I don't know. But, because they're dead. But we aren't dead. So I would rather spend my time looking at cool effects and buying lots of cool effects, spending money on stuff that I'm not going to use, than practice. Because everybody knows that practice is overrated. Good piano players can just show up, and it just happens. They just unleash stuff on their keyboards. And so to get to that goodness and kind of be bad at the same time, just don't practice. At least that's what I've heard. Anyways, so once you don't practice, you won't know the parts, which means that you can just go back to playing way too much and covering other people's spots. So like, if you don't practice, if you don't listen to the songs, you're not going to know that the guitar part's there. So just, play there. It'll sound good, trust me. Anyways, I hope you guys realize this was kind of satirical in a ways. If you didn't, well, I got you. So the main points to take away from this are, you do want to actually, if you want to be a good piano player, just could do kind of the opposite. Whatever I said, just do the opposite. So you want to make sure that you don't play all the time. You want to make sure that you don't use effects. Piano playing is not about sounding cool. It's about adding to the mix and not taking away from what God wants to do. And it's about practicing so that you know your part, so that, again, you don't take away from what God wants to do in people's lives. All right, so let's roll the intro to the next section. I don't have a music for that yet. Cool. So, all right. we just talked about piano for probably a good solid 10 minutes, judging from my clock. Let's talk about pads. Now pads are crazy. Pads are kind of the basis for what us synthesists do. I'm just going to go ahead and switch to pads. Yeah. So this is kind of my pad sound, and this is what I've been pretty much the only set pad sound that I've been using for the past 6 months. And I think it's pretty decent. It's pretty great. But it's just a pad, you know. So how do you use that creatively? This isn't satirical anymore, so you can take this to heart. But so one of the first ways, as has been discussed, when you want to make a pad sound full, you have a few options. The first it's going to come down to is the sound of the pad itself. You're going to want, if you're going for that low dark sound, you're going to want to make sure that you have a cutoff filter on there, and then that'll produce the low frequencies that you need in order to get that sound. And then to fill in more spots or more frequencies with that specific sound, you're going to have to decide to play a certain way. Now, what you can, if you, again, it's kind of a balance actually between the piano and other synth stuff. So if you're doing leads, you're obviously doing a very specific part, and so you're kind of playing as little as possible, I would say. But with pads, you're kind of trying to play more, but at the same time play less. It's a little confusing, but so let me just show you. This is kind of what I tend to do. Is I tend to do like a good, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm just doing a nice low octave, and then I'm doing some kind of inversion up in the top. And now that's kind of nice sounding. It's got some depth to it. And that comes from both what I'm playing, which is a nice open left hand. If you use too many notes in the left hand, it's gonna sound bad. Like, that's just Mud City right there. And what I'm doing in the right hand is because those mid-range frequencies, they can get muddied up, but you're probably gonna end up, sorry about that, you're probably gonna end up behind the mix, not necessarily in front. So you can get away with playing a little bit more in the mid-range frequencies. I'll actually do an octave of the fifth, and then the 1 and the 3 in the top. I think that's the second inversion. Yeah, I don't know. So, and now talking about variety though, you aren't relegated to just playing the regular old chords. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with practice in the piano video, or the piano section of the video. The more that you practice, the more tools that you have at your disposal. So jazz is actually jazz and gospel are pretty interesting to me. I was raised in a white gospel kind of home, but my mom was super into gospel, so growing up I'd always hear her play these crazy chords, and I was always like, wow, that's cool sounding. And then when I got to playing, I realized I'm pretty much better off sticking with the regular stuff, but the other stuff sounded cool. And now there's two main variations on the classic chord that I would say. They're addendums, I guess. I don't know. They aren't augmented chords, if that's what you're thinking. But so the first thing we're going to do to add intrigue to the chord, or dynamics, instead of playing the regular chord, other than you should learn your inversions, but we're going to go beyond that. We're going to play a 7th chord. So this is how you figure out a 7th chord. Those are 1, 3, and 5. That's a 6. That's a 7. Super easy. Playing this together, though, is kind of weird. So we tend not to play those together. What you can actually do play the same chord that we just did, and because we're playing the C's, or the ones, very prominently in the bass, we don't have to really play it in the right hand. We're just going to play the B, E, and G. And that forms the C7 major chord. And it's nice and pleasing to the ear because it's a little bit more major, but it's not just a regular major chord. So that's a fun little thing to play. I like to do that a lot. It especially sounds good with the minors. For the minors, all you have to do is kind of, I actually play it's called the relative, it's the relative major of it or whatever, I don't know. So, for example, if you're in the key of C, your main minor is going to be your 6 probably, which is the A minor. To figure out what your 7th is going to be, if you want to do the 7th the way that I showed you, all you do is go up to 3 to the 1. So the 6 and the 1 complement each other as the 7th kind of. I don't know my theory that well, so I'm just kind of, I don't know. But so this is what that should sound like, as opposed to the regular. Now if you really want to get crazy, take the 7th of the relative major to that chord that you were just playing. So the C is what we were playing before. Now we're going to take the 7th of that, which is what we did before, which is the C7. We're going to lay off the C, and now we're going to just do E over C, or E over A minor. And now it becomes even more interesting, I should say. And you can hear that, kind of thing in let's see, what song is it? Worthy is the Lamb? I know it's a kind of an oldie, but it's one of the most prominent features of it, I think, is so what we're doing is we're going from the F sharp minor 9 to the D major 7, D7 major. And you just get you get some crazy sounds from there, and it makes it a lot more interesting. So for instance, if you're playing Sinking Deep, as I know many of us have in the past, kind of turns into more of a, like, what's that Alicia Keys song? I don't know, but it makes it you can definitely agree that it makes it much more interesting. So I took way too much time on that, so I'm gonna speed through the next section. So we talked about pads. We got to start with the source to make sure that we've got a nice full sound, and then the way that we play also influences the sound that we can get. But let's talk about dynamics. How do we build dynamics with a pad? Well, the number one way is this guy over here, the mod wheel. I know that most of us know this already, but I'll just reiterate it. Essentially what a mod wheel does is, I talked before about how we turn down the frequencies to have this low pad sound. So that's it with the low. That's with the low frequencies able to pass through, but not any of the high frequencies. So as we open this up, that's what we call it, I guess. We open up the filter. We get more and more of the high frequencies that can pass through. And so this is what we kind of use for our huge built-up sections. And this is the high frequencies essentially are kind of a measurement of energy. So as you can hear, pretty loud. And so that's kind of one way that we use pads, and we do pads dynamically. Otherwise, we just be down here when everybody's going crazy and be like, "Your love so deep is rushing your belly." It's kind of like, you know, you want to contribute, and you want to kind of open it up. So I think I've talked about this before, but what I actually do is, in order to add more layers of dynamics, instead of just this one way, what I tend to do is I'll be playing, and then as the song progresses, if it needs more energy, because I'll turn on the wetness. Now the wetness just means how much of the sound is going through the reverb. So right here we have 0.5, so half of my sound is becoming inundated with my shimmer sound. And so that's adding some energy to it. However, as you may or may not have heard, your reverbs come with certain tone affecting EQ parameters. So let's hear it again with no reverb. Super warm. Now, turned it all the way up. Not quite as warm. So why is that? Well, my Valhalla Shimmer has a low cut at about 400, so you won't hear the reverb. No, you will, but it's just weaker. To these points, you kind of just hear everything in between. So the more mix that you have, the more wetness, the more that the reverb affects your tone. So I thought that was kind of cool to kind of affect them in that way. And what you can do, and this is my last point, is actually what I do is I map the reverbs in reverse. And I'll show you how to do that. So what you're going to do, I went to my conference because I have my patch set up at a conference level, or at the concert level. I'm going to go down to your shimmer. You're going to pick your wet dry, and you're just going to invert the parameter. And what this means essentially is that as your mod wheel goes up, your shimmer mix is going to go down, giving you a much cleaner, drier sound that, well, let me just show you how this works normally. So you have wet dry up all the way, you have feedback. Let's turn this to this, I don't know. So you go like this, you start out nice and low, and you got this cool effect, and then, oh, we're going into a big chorus. Whoa! And kind of with what I was talking about before, you have all this reverb on your sound, and it sounds cool. It's super M83-ish, but it's taking away from like the frequency ranges that other instruments can come into, and I don't know. I just don't think that that's really what you're looking for. So what I've been doing is I've been making it so that as I increase my cutoff, or as I open up my filter, that my shimmer mix becomes lessened. So invert. This will make it completely dry, and this takes away from some of the tone affecting. This takes away from some of the tone affecting parameters. So you're just going to want to watch out for that. And there we go. So now we're going to have this sound. And as we open up the mod wheel, it's still got a little reverb, or that might even just be the release though, but it's much cleaner, so you aren't having this crazy like reverb going on when you're trying to do these clean cut leads, and I don't know. So that's my big idea for this week, is how to decrease the amount of space that I'm taking up, as you can tell from the rest of what I've been talking about. So anyways, I hope you learned something from my ramblings. Hope this wasn't too long, and I wish you all a blessed February 26th. Hashtag youth revival, hashtag cool Vokes samples, hashtag oh. Yeah. Anyways, so peace.